Hello and welcome once again. We're back. We're raising questions once again, and we're going to take an approach to 3 different fields of questions, and then take another approach to 3 more fields of questions. The first field, this is very popular, sometimes dull, but very popular. Politics, the political field. Then we'll move on to the economy and then to various social questions. And the whole purpose of this show is to say special things are coming up in this season, and this is sort of a preview of them. And we'll of course get into other issues as they arise. So these are more or less the fundamental things that we know we're going to be considering, and then other things will be coming up, of course. First, back to the political field. We want to talk about Donald Trump right now and in the future. Donald Trump seems to be causing a lot of problems for a lot of people. He's a very interesting man. He's also the President of the United States of America, which is one reason to talk about him. And his political troubles, especially with the guy whom he appointed, who is now looking at him very critically, Mr. Sessions. Mr. Sessions personally isn't doing that, but Mr. Sessions is in charge of the people who are doing that. Boy, where is that going to go? Nobody knows. Great big question. Another political question, at least in my view, is the environment, is one of the environment. The environment is in such terrible shape, say a lot of people, that we really have to face the question, how much longer for the human race on this planet? We really have to start asking that kind of question. And again, that feeds back to Mr. Trump, who has recently announced that he's going to roll back more of the environmental regulations from the previous president, Mr. Obama. Will Mr. Trump be able to do that? Even his most rabid fans in his political base are very often hunters and fishers and people otherwise who spend a lot of time in the great outdoors. Are they going to start looking at Mr. Trump, who to some extent now is their hero, rather skeptically? And how's everybody going to take care of that, as a matter of fact? We only have one environment, and we have to take care of it. What about Barack Obama and his inserting himself into the congressional races? We're a couple of months away from congressional races as this show appears, and we had to ask, what is Barack Obama doing inserting himself into the politics of this era? Some people say rather in a way that breaks the norms that previous presidents adhered to. So what's going to happen now? We have a somewhat different situation than before, in other words, where retired presidents went back to their mansions and their libraries and awaited more money coming in and more opportunity to make more speeches and so forth, except for good old Jimmy Carter, the honest ex-president. And what about, talking about politics, what about the influence of Bernie Sanders? We progressives, of course, hope that he has a giant influence, but are there also some issues, at least 1 or 2, where good people can really disagree with Bernie? Great big question. Moving rapidly along, we come to the economy. Are there any questions there? Yes. Has the economy gotten fair recently? Answer, obviously no. How unfair has it gotten? Well, there are a lot of indicators. I just found out, for instance, that 40% of American workers, now that may mean all workers, everybody who goes to work, not just people who go to factories, 40% of them are struggling to pay for basics like utilities, the mortgage, the rent, etc. 40% are struggling. What's the definition of that? And is that true? And isn't that bad? Another thing that indicates the economy is in terrible shape. Half of American workers, again, what's a worker, but half of the people, I suppose, who go to work at all, don't take all their vacation every year. One reason is they're afraid that when they come back, their desk will have somebody else's name on it. Is this fair? Absolutely not. How does it compare to life in other countries? Answer is badly. And the question is how badly? And what about worker pay? That seems to be stagnating, except for very, very recently, as the people on top earn more and more and more, even as they're accused of all sorts of wrongdoing and are kicked out of their CEO position. Somehow they magically emerge millions of dollars richer the very next day. Field number 3 for questions, social fields. Now, all of this melds together, of course, politics, economy, and the social problems. But what about the church, the Catholic Church in particular? How much trouble is it in after a big report from Pennsylvania about maltreatment of children by the church, or at least by people who work for the church? Can we say that's actually the church's fault? Is there something wrong with the church, or is it just something wrong with a minority, a big minority of people who may have tortured children in the name of God? Not good. Another social problem that we ought to go into is drugs and addiction. You know, there are a lot of forms of addiction. The drug addiction is obvious, and the question is, what can we do about it? The next question is, are there other forms of addiction that are equally interesting and vital to solve? The answer, of course, yes. We're all addicted. Well, I'm not, of course. But it seems like everybody else is addicted to video screens. And it's tragic when you go to a place like a cafe and see mothers and fathers on their video screen with tiny tots on their very own video screen. Nobody talking to anybody else. Of course, they might be both emailing the same person in Tahiti, but is this any good? Has this video screen revolution, to which we all do fall prey, has this changed the mentality of our people, and what will be the results of that? Well, we'll be back and look at some other things from another point of view in a moment.
I bought the fresh stick, just as you told me. You're absolutely right. It's neat and quick, and it goes on dry. It did make me feel cool and sweet, just as you said. I did everything you said, but my boss still hasn't asked me to lunch.
Unlike some deodorants, Fresh doesn't guarantee you'll get ahead in business. All Fresh does is keep you fresh.
When you think of it, that's quite a lot.
We're back. We're surprised. We have a special guest with us. He's going to be appearing quite often in upcoming shows. Very knowledgeable guy. Has a sort of childlike appeal. We were saying that there are going to be some more issues besides the ones that we've already done coming up during the next season, season 3. And let's start out with global issues and then go to legal issues and then to psychological issues, more or less psychological. One of the great global issues right now is the fact that Mr. Trump seems to be making everybody mad. Russia and China are getting together closer and closer economically, and right at the moment they have just launched the biggest military exercise, peacetime, ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, which has been decades. In other words, the Russians and the Chinese are getting together, not just economically, but militarily. Is this a threat to the United States? And is Mr. Trump conducting the wrong foreign policy? Big, big, big question. What about also China and Korea and Japan? China's very active around the world now, and that's a big question. What's going to happen with China? Gigantic economy and a lot of influence around the world. And as the United States, at least Mr. Trump, gets closer and closer to Korea, the Chinese and the Japanese are getting more and more worried because this is upsetting the balance of power, perhaps, out there in the Pacific. And so you're starting to see already some new ideas from Japan, and especially some stirrings towards an independent Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines in Japan. Of course, they've always been officially independent now for decades, but it could be that the Japanese are going to start pressing for more military influence in the near future as they see America maybe drifting towards Korea. This is a fascinating question. We don't know what's going to be happening. What about in Germany, too? That's another question on the global scale. In Germany, the right wing, the Alternative for Deutschland, the Alternative for Germany, which is a party, it calls itself the Alternative, that is taking on more and more of a real structure. It's turning into a real party. It's got a lot of influence. And if they get into some state governments and into the federal government, Actually, that's already happening. Then what's going to start happening in Germany? Are they going to drift, the Germans, towards the right wing? Boy, that raises a lot of questions, and we'll get into that in the near future. What about on the legal side of things? That's one of my favorite areas. And one of my favorite sub-areas is the right to privacy. The Supreme Court has said the Constitution guarantees us a right to privacy, even though the right to privacy is not listed in the Constitution. We have a right to privacy. Now, to a lot of people, that means, oh, good, no totalitarian government, we're safe from the government, meaning we're safe. That might or might not be true in this era of massive surveillance and also what I think is an evil partnership between the U.S. government and outfits like Google, Facebook, and Yahoo. Even if the government does not meet secretly with representatives of those three companies and others, even if the government doesn't make an official pact with them, there can be a silent conspiracy that goes on, especially if the government says, just don't tell us what you're doing, and we won't get upset. We do know that Facebook, Google, and Yahoo are surveilling more and more and more. It's just come out, for instance, at least it's just reached my consciousness, that Yahoo is surveying all of the email that it handles and sending data to marketers. Verizon is connected with Yahoo, and Yahoo is surveying your Yahoo email and surveilling your Yahoo email to find out what you like and send it off to marketers, which of course is all for your benefit. Big question mark there. Now to psychology, just one last point. In other words, we started out saying that President Trump is making a lot of people mad, especially in environmental affairs and other domestic matters, and especially in global affairs. And it seems to me that the whole country is looking, therefore, to another person or to another influence that could act as an umbrella over our national affairs. We saw that very strongly with the recent death and funeral of Senator John McCain. And he has been placed on a pedestal. He deserves to be on some sort of pedestal. Good man, good senator, and so forth. However, I think a lot of the tribute to him may have been, this is a question mark, may have been a little overdone. People were constantly talking about his high ideals. He talked about his high ideals and left a message to the country, very moving, about high ideals and how we had to stick to them. But the question beyond that is, which ideals? Senator McCain was quite conservative in many respects. Are those the ideals that we ought to adhere to? Or what about the progressive ideals that we need to get closer to and sustain? Well, those are some of the questions. Our special guest will be with us again, and also we've asked a number of other well-known people, again, from Kissinger to the Queen, and to, at this stage, 3 prime ministers have been invited to appear on the show, and we'll see when they can make it. All right, thanks for watching. We'll be back.